Um, so, timing-wise, we just your timing?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, I'm Tyler Church. I did my senior project on taxidermy, more specifically tanning hides. My main connection to this topic began really because I'm a hunter, and so I'm kind of into that you kill it, you eat it kind of thing. Really trying to use everything that you can from an animal. And I didn't really start getting interested in taxidermy itself until this summer when I actually went hunting and got a few squirrels and tried to tan the hides and a few things. And it didn't turn out too well, a little crunchy, but I did a little YouTube research, and that's when I learned that I really like this topic and there was a lot to it. So I knew then that I wanted to do this as my senior project because, one, I didn't know much about it, and two, I knew that I was interested enough that I could go a whole semester without getting bored of it. So then I started school, and when I started my project, I had a couple of first goals, and really, since I didn't know much, my first goal was really knowledge. And so I have a list of questions that I actually wrote down to try to answer by the end of the year, and I have definition of taxidermy, where did it come from, when did it start, some methods of taxidermy, different categories of taxidermy, and how long some processes take. And then, because it's knowledge, I obviously started doing research to figure out all of these questions. I started my research and I was amazed about how much information there was. It didn't take me, a week and a half to realize that taxidermy was way too big of a topic. It was way too big. And so I actually narrowed it down to just tanning of hides. But some of the stuff I learned in my first week and a half was really interesting. I have just a few things here. First, I never thought about it, but the first real taxidermists were cavemen. They would take their kills and they would dry out the hides and use them as shelters and clothing. And they even have boots they've actually made, which is interesting. Then my research led into Europe and how they used it for science and things like that, for museum specimens and bringing things back from the Galapagos actually, and doing taxidermy to show them to people, which was pretty interesting. And then it obviously turned into more fashionable things and, hunting trophies. And now, people are getting their dogs and cats taxidermied, and they have competitions with the taxidermists where they actually have a topic, and then they have a bunch of taxidermist competitions and stuff. So that's really interesting. But even after I narrowed it down to just tanning hides, I was still amazed at the wall of information. Every single time I went on the web, I found something new, and I was always interested. Interviews. When I started doing my research, I started looking around for interviews, and I was asking my grandpa, because he's a farrier, so he knows a lot of people. So I was asking him, and he kind of hinted at the fact. He was like, I know some stuff, and so I was like, oh, I never thought about it. So I actually interviewed my grandfather. He had some good stuff to say. He actually grew up in Idaho, and so there's lots of coyotes around, and they would have these warrants on them. He said he'd go out and shoot coyotes, but you couldn't just sell a dead coyote to the fur company. So he had to know how to skin it and flesh it, which is getting all the fat and stuff off the bottom of the hide, and then he'd have to dry it and then give it to him that way. So he had some knowledge that I had no idea he had. He actually gave me a great tip to use fabric softener to help soften hides up when you're soaking them. So that was good. But one of my regrets is I didn't get any other interviews after that. I was really into my research, and so I never really got out into the community as much as I would like it to. Difficulties, that's why I felt happy to do my project. My difficulty with the class really was my research paper, as you probably have seen. But my research paper really, I felt like derailed me a little bit. I kind of was like a train going on the tracks with my research and what I was looking at. And to do the research paper, it's really hard to find a topic to write about tanning hides that wasn't completely just derailing me. And so I just kind of I stumbled around and really didn't get through a research paper, so that's why I don't have one. But that's why I just kind of mainstreamed my actual research. So I learned a lot. I just couldn't get it into a research paper that was relatable close enough. For my product, my hardest thing was obviously getting a hold of, hides to work with. But I was lucky enough to actually shoot a deer this year in hunting season. And we actually had in the back of my binder, if you look really quick, I have a document by Washington State Fish and Wildlife that talks about raccoons. And if they're killing your livestock, which we had chickens, and they were killing our chickens, just killing a bunch of our chickens, we tried to trap it. We tried to coop them in, but they just got smarter and smarter, and it didn't take that many kills to realize this is a pretty sweet deal. And so we had them killing our chickens in the middle of the day when we were gone, and so they were just getting too crafty. So we ended up using the lethal control option, which is in there, and so I actually got raccoons used for my senior project also. So that was cool. And then my speech was my last difficulty, just because I've practiced a lot, and I still have to. I'm trying to get it down because my practice is too long, and so getting what to cut out really was hard for me. But what I learned, one of the main things I learned about tanning hides is how many methods there are. It's amazing how many methods there actually are. I just have a list here. Chromium tanning, aluminum tanning, vegetable tanning, brain tanning, Indian tanning, pea tanning, battery acid tanning, mineral tanning, and it just goes on and on just like that. There's just so many different types of tanning. I'm mainly focused on brain tanning, vegetable tanning, and a little bit of the battery acid tanning, which is actually most of the ma and pa taxidermy shops use battery acid tanning, which is interesting. But I started wondering why there were so many tanning methods. And I learned that each method has a different product. And so each way you tan the hide has a different result for what you do with it. The vegetable tanning, they soak it in bark extract and different things, and that makes a nice, when that comes out, it makes a really nice stampable leather and workable leather. But when it gets wet, it decolors and it doesn't do well with heat. And it's not that supple, but it's good for stamping. But like brain tanning, which is what the Indians actually did, it sounds gruesome, but it made a soft, supple hide that they could use for moccasins and clothing, and you could actually have fur on for that kind of tanning, and that was obviously useful for insulation factor and stuff. But one thing that I learned about all of these methods was the main method that they have to go through to get from an animal to a tanned hide or leather. First, you have to skin the animal. Obviously, you have to get it off of there. Then you have to flesh the hide, which actually, that's what he's doing right there. That's a double-handed fleshing knife. They have a bunch of tools, and they have something called a beaver knife. It's about this long and kind of has a swoosh blade to it. But I didn't get a hold of any of that. I was just using pocket knives and like what I could get on my hands on. But once you flesh the hide, which is getting all the fat and oils off, then you can actually get to the hide. Then you have to soak the hide, clean it off, get the dirt and blood or whatever's on there. And pretty much all of these are universal through all the methods. Then you get to drying the hide, which then you get a little bit of difference there. Like this right here is an Indian or Native American drying hide. He's actually working a hide right there. They use wooden tools and things, but they have hoops, wooden hoops that they build, and then they puncture holes around the whole outside, and they use leather strapping and stretch it so the air can get to all sides of it. I didn't build a hoop. I actually use what most people use today. They just use a board and nails, and so you just tack down the hide. But a problem that I was having is I wasn't getting air underneath that fur, so the hide was getting dry before the fur was getting dry. So I actually learned a neat trick when I was reading a magazine the other day. You can actually lift the hide off of the nails. I never thought about it, but you can tack them down, and then you just lift it up to the head of the nail, and it gives you about an inch and a half gap of air between the hide and the fur and the table. So that was pretty helpful. But then after that, now it's a dried piece of, basically just dried hide. Then you can actually do the tanning solution, and that's when you go into the different, different methods of tanning, vegetable tanning, brain tanning. Brain tanning actually doesn't preserve the hide. It actually puts oils into it, like battery acid tanning. They use oatmeal. They take oatmeals and soak it, and then take out the actual like oils and stuff and leave the flakes behind. But you have to have a way to make it soft and supple first, and then they actually would use smoke, which is what they're doing right there, to actually cause a preserve layer. That's why this is so white, and that's dark color, because that's why it's that color, because smoke. That's why when you see moccasins and things kind of a dark brown, that's because they're all smoked to be water repellent a little bit. But then obviously, after you've done your method of preserving, then you can work it, make it into moccasins, make it into whatever. And then, yeah. But my project, I have said before, I have a raccoon and a deer hide. But one thing I faced with this thing that I had problems with was I actually sewed felts on here. That took about 5 hours of sewing, but especially when I'm not handy at sewing. But that turned out well. Turned out good. But one problem I had with this is I didn't know raccoons were so nasty. They have a little bit of just an oily layer that I just could not figure out how to get off of there, and so it's just a little bit of like a wet dog. Luckily, I'm not going to use it for anything. I'm just going to use it as a wall mount. But if you want to touch it, you can. You have the option. I have hand sanitizer.
Yeah, nice.
So it's a little oily because you can feel that little bit of that dog grittiness. But it turned out you want to touch it or yeah. Anyway, my hand sanitizer probably stinks a little bit. That's what I'm doing. Then I have my deer hide here, which turned out pretty good. I didn't actually smoke this because I knew I wasn't going to do anything with it either. I'm going to make it into a wall mount, keep it. But I was going to sew felt on this one too, but I decided to leave it off so you can actually see the underside and see the actual hide of it. See, this is not like leather. It's soft, and it could have been softer. I didn't work it that much, but if you really work it and get a hoop, you can make it really nice and soft. And if you want to feel that, you can.
No, that's great.
Have to get a brush that out. I actually have a brush, but basically what this proves is that I have the skills now to take something from an animal and turning it into a rug or a usable piece of leather, and it just it's a really good skill that I have that I'm glad that I have now. But hindsight, basically lessons that I've learned, time management, basically. Not just time management, but priorities. I've always been focused on this project. I've always been researching and doing things, but to take that time management and go, okay, I need to stop researching, I need to write this paper, for the class and things like that. So that kind of, that was one of my difficulties, not just, staying on the web all the time and learning more and more because I was just so interested by this topic, but to actually, stop and write a paper, that was kind of my lesson to actually be able to prioritize things. Wishes or regrets. I wish I would have gotten a few more interviews, get into the world a little bit more. That'd have been probably really interesting. But overall, I'm really happy with my project. I'm glad that I have the skills now. It's a fulfilling feeling knowing that I can take everything from an animal and use it. It's just like recycling to the max to me. It's really green, not really, but it's really nice knowing that I'm not just, because you hunt something and then you just throw away the hide, it just feels useful. It feels like shooting a deer and then just throwing away all the meat. It feels wrong. And so I'm glad that I have the skills to use that. But, any questions?
So you're a hunter, and you plan to use this in the future when you go hunting?
Yeah, I definitely want to, every time I go hunting, save the hide, and the next deer I get, I actually want to make moccasins out of. Yeah. This one's my first deer. I actually have a picture. I'm going to show you. I have a picture of just me, my first deer. But
So you rifle hunt?
Yeah, it's actually muzzleloader smoke pole. But yeah, so I did this one like this so that I could put it on the wall and keep it. But the next one I'm actually gonna probably take off the fur, which you use. I didn't even talk about that. Try to cut things out. They use lime and soak it in lime, and then you scrape against the fur, and that'll take the fur off, and so you get actual leather instead of fur on tanning. That's one of the reasons why Indians did braid tanning, because it's not harmful to the fur or anything. It's you know.
Would you ever go into taxidermy for business?
No. No, I think it's just more of a hobby and a skill that I wanted to know.
Sometimes hobbies turn into business.
Yeah, we'll see, but I don't think so. But I do enjoy it though.
So,
It's a nice product.
what kept you from making contacts with to get interviews?
Really myself.
It's hard to make those phone calls.
Just yeah, I tried to send some emails out, but I'm not good with the technology, so I don't know what happened. So I just kind of gave up on the internet stuff. But yeah, I just never. I just was doing other things, and I never just went out and just took that step to get out there.
There are taxidermists in the area, right?
Yeah, I've actually looked at some taxidermists. There's actually one. That's another thing. I don't know why, but I was a little uncomfortable going to some taxidermist house. So I'm like, that's the guy that lives in Perry and Bremerton, Critters Taxidermy, and I think it's a home shop. Yeah, and I didn't want to just drive in the driveway and shed in the back.
Well, that's a good skill to learn.
Yeah.
So how do you make those cold calls? Cold calls are real hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that cold contact is hard. Those are pretty cool.
Well, the thing is, then if somebody says, "Oh, I don't have time," and you skilled your mind that you want some information, they don't have time, and that's hard then.
Yeah, that was one thing that I wish I would have just took that step and got some interviews, but
We as adults have that problem.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a real hard thing. And the paper, that was a barrier. It sounds like because you didn't have a sort of a way to get into the paper to get started on it.
Yeah, it really. I was bouncing around between different topics that I wanted to choose, but that we're supposed to do a paper on something that's controversial, which for tanning hides, I was like, I actually thought about doing just fur for products, period, and fashion fur products, which wouldn't. I think it would have been pretty relatable to my topic, but my research didn't reflect, fashion fur. So.
Right. Your research is more on how to rather than the fashion part of it.
Yeah. This is something you can use all your life.
Yeah, that's what I really was thinking, that instead of doing something, that was just going to be, bake a cake or something, I really wanted to get something that I knew I would use, and I've always wanted to know. Because I've always wanted to know. I always thought there was like one method of tanning, and I didn't realize that there was that many methods for different types of leathers and different things. Because I was wondering how do they get, moccasin fur, but a leather jacket looks completely different, but it's both from a cow. Like, how do you do that? So, yeah, it's really interesting to know all that stuff.
Yeah, very good.
Well, I'll tell you something. My dad was a First World War veteran, and his discharge was on goat skin. And I took it to a taxidermy, and I said, it was just soft as that deer skin. And I said, what do I do to preserve this? He said, just keep it out of the light and keep it, so the sun don't hit it. But they didn't have the access to paper at that time.
Yeah.
That we have today. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's funny, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Once you get it into the dried state, it's pretty good, unless you get it into the weather or something. If you want to actually wear it and use it, then you have to smoke it or, make leather things. But I didn't smoke this one because I knew I wanted to. Also, smoke gives it a good smell, which is nice, but well, I had a couple mistakes there. It's funny on the belly skin. It always is really thin. I don't know why. It seems like out of all the places to be thin,